About 3 weeks ago, Katie Morton tearfully confessed that she's been thinking about making a video about her feelings of overwhelm and exhaustion and burnout for months. Then she went on to talk about her trauma response to the pandemic. She described herself as thinking, just like the rest of society, she said that trauma is only those big things, like going to war or having a car accident. Then she said that she thought she was being selfish to think that she was having a hard time. And when she found herself without her usual coping skills, like yoga and meeting with friends because of the pandemic, she just shut down and pushed through and ended up feeling overworked, overwhelmed, and depleted. I heard her say that and I thought, wow, that sounds like a day in the life of someone who's struggling to overcome childhood trauma, like daily struggles. I'm not saying anything about the value of Katie's work here, but what I really want to point out is that therapists really often miss this, and it can really lead trauma survivors to further disconnect from their own sense of what's right for them because of an example when it comes to self-healing and self-care. Examples like this one.
I haven't been taking care of myself, and I've been working a lot, even though life stuff is stressful, on top of like the world stress of pandemic life and chaos and stuff like that.
There are some things that I think are important for us to learn when we're talking about complex PTSD, and especially when we're looking for help as we heal. And to help with that point, I also want to talk about another YouTube influencer who actually talks specifically about complex PTSD. About 2 weeks ago, Katie actually shared that she wasn't going to put up a Monday video on a message to her community. And in the comments, the crappy childhood fairy, Anna Runkle, left this comment. Here's something else really interesting that Anna said back in May.
And please, the algorithm, that YouTube algorithm, I'm a slave to it. And the only way anybody sees me is if I keep putting videos up.
So why am I pointing all of this out? As a licensed therapist who's also a survivor of childhood trauma, the things that Katie is just describing and the clues that Anna's leaving are the things that you live with every day after trauma. Every day. These are the things that we really have to pay attention to. It's things I stay tuned into for my own well-being and that I teach my clients to stay aware of too. It's the little things that Katie missed that led her to a state that she describes in her video. And it's the subtle comments that Anna makes, like the one that I captured in the previous clips. Think about this. When you've suffered because of childhood trauma, every day feels exhausting and overwhelming and like there's no break. And even though we're no longer children, the trauma brain makes us feel like we're still in it every single day.
That I feel like I'm just now acknowledging the waves of hurt and overwhelm that I sustained. And they're still coming. That's another thing too. And I think that's why I've kind of put off making this video, because it feels exhausting. I feel overwhelmed and it feels like it's still happening. So I'm like, well, I don't even know how to put my thoughts together, because it still feels like I'm in it, like I'm still in the battle.
So the first thing I'm talking about that you have to consistently pay attention to is going at a pace that doesn't work for you because you're focusing on something else besides your own wellness, and having a solid foundation to come back to that keeps you grounded. So many of us have felt this way before, and we felt this way before the pandemic started because of unhealed trauma. Then the pandemic came and added a layer that brought out the need for more attention to answer this question. What can I do that will help me feel just a little bit more in control when everything around me feels out of control? See, with complex trauma, the world already felt unsafe. Then, when COVID hit, the perception of our trauma brain trying to convince us that the world was unsafe were actually right. The world the air we breathe, the people we love were suddenly unsafe to us. And when all of this happened, I just started focusing on the little things, like the really little things, like literally paint by numbers, like breathing every day, like exercising inside the house, taking more naps, getting more vitamin C, paying more attention to what would give me comfort, and doing those things that helped me feel better within the limits of the pandemic restrictions. That's what we have to always be looking at. You can't just stop doing the things that you were doing, but there are other things that have to stop. I paid less attention to the news because we all know that the news keep us watching by keeping us scared. Spend less time pushing to get through. Do less shutdown. Pay more careful attention to our own needs. So getting back to the basic of what works for you and not paying attention to any of the non-essentials until and unless your basic are covered first every day. And I've taught this to my clients, and they've actually fared better than other people have on an emotional level when it comes to not feeling more burned out, scared, and overwhelmed because of the pandemic. So I do want to share with you at this point that there's a system that you can use to heal your childhood trauma. And it's the same system that would help anyone who wants the tools to cope well during times like this pandemic. And it's called the Trauma Erase Method. And I'll link it in the description below. Now, I'm not blaming Kati or Anna for where they're at, but I do want to point out here that there are things that make people like therapists and YouTube helpers, even me, get to the point of burnout. And those are the same things that make you feel unwell. Healing and well-being during troubling times requires attention to really specific things on a really consistent basis that help you on a personal level every single day. One of the other things that Kati mentioned is that she was worried that her community would get a feeling from her videos that she isn't enjoying her work.
People might be feeling the fact that you're really overwhelmed.
That's a valid point that I want to comment on, because when you're working with someone to help you heal, what you feel on that unspoken level is so super important. Because what you felt on the unspoken level when you were a kid, but what you weren't allowed to respond to, is why you have a trauma response. And when you've decided who to listen to while you're looking for someone to help you heal, you've got to listen to what isn't being said. Those unspoken messages are just as important now as they were when you were younger. I promise you that. So if the person that you're learning from is pushing too hard and not putting their own health first, that comes through. It's leading by example. And it's a situation where subconsciously, just like in childhood, when you say, well, if Kati does it, then I can do it. Or, Anna had trauma and so did I, so if she's pushing, it's okay for me to push. After all, I want to achieve big things too. But it's not okay to sacrifice your well-being to accomplish stuff, believe me. Shutting down and pushing through, even for the sake of accomplishment, is a trauma response. And that will only strengthen the trauma parts of your brain. So what's my bottom line here? Am I telling you not to listen to Kati or Anna? No, wait, I'm not saying that at all. I'm super happy, especially that Kati has pledged to take better care of herself, and I really hope that she does. But what I am saying is that you've got to put more into what you hear when you listen to yourself than when you listen to anyone else. Just like Kati said, she's in a trauma response when she's shutting down and pushing through. All of us are susceptible to that. But you and I are even more susceptible if we've had childhood trauma. And the extent to which you listen to the little things that are happening inside of you and taking clues from them so you can take care of yourself, the better off you'll be, no matter what's on your task list for that day. Kati and Anna both show signs of not listening, shutting down, and pushing through. Listen to what they say, but also watch what they do. Learn from it. Don't necessarily follow the steps that they're taking. It's some of the unspoken trauma habits that we learn by watching that we need to be aware of. Even from me. Take what helps and leave the rest. From the bottom of my heart, I thank you for watching, and I wish you well.